Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So what is happening with the whole Brexit process, and is it even possible to stop it from going ahead, despite millions of people voting in favour? In Westminster is the Liberal Democrat MP Tom Brake, the party's shadow spokesperson for Foreign Affairs. The Lib Dems have said they'll fight the next election on halting Brexit. And with me in the studio, the Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng, who was a vocal supporter for Brexit during the referendum campaign. Tom Brake, can you just explain the case for a second referendum?
Well, I think there is a case for if there is a snap general election, and I think that is a possibility perhaps in October, that if a number of parties went into that game with an unequivocal pledge to keep the UK within the EU, if those parties won an overall majority, I think there would be a case for the UK to look again at the question of Brexit.
What about in 2 years' time?
Well, I think that is more difficult. I think what I think in 2 years' time would be legitimate, and I don't think that 2 years' time is a realistic timescale for the UK to complete discussions about what our relationship with the EU would be, because the Prime Minister is saying she will only perhaps invoke it, Article 50, at the beginning of next year, or indeed perhaps even at the end of next year. But I think what would be legitimate would be at the end of that process, once it is clear what the UK's relationship with the EU will be, in other words, whether it's the Switzerland model or the Norway model, that the public could have a say on whether they think that is acceptable or in fact a worse deal than our continued membership of the European Union.
Kwasi Kwarteng, would that be an outrageous thought?
I think this idea, I mean, clearly they're going through the stages of grief. Tom's side didn't win the referendum. There was a clear majority, decisive majority in favour of Brexit. And now this notion that there's going to be a second referendum. My experience of reruns of elections, they should be careful what they wish for. I suspect that if the perception was that the sore losers foisted another referendum on the British people, I think they would lose probably even more heavily than they did first time round. So I don't think that's a road that we need to go down. I don't think there's any real...
Can it even be stopped? I mean, once Article 50 has been triggered, I thought there was an automatic ejection at the end of 2 years.
That's exactly right. And also, a lot of this debate, forgive me, Tom, I can see he's shaking his head, but a lot of the debate assumes it's very insular. If you talk to people in Europe, I've been in Italy for a week, I speak to politicians in Holland, they're through with this. They want us to leave the EU. They want this process to be activated. And if you read their statements, they're very clear that we are going to leave the EU.
Tom Brake, why were you shaking your head? Is that not correct?
Well, my understanding is that Article 50 is very unclear once it has been invoked, whether, for instance, the UK could decide unilaterally to stay within the EU. So I think it's perfectly possible that at the end of an 18-month process of deliberation with Boris Johnson, Liam Fox and David Davis trying to sort out what on earth our relationship with the EU is going to be, that has been so catastrophic that the UK may decide to think again about Brexit. And I think that would be the right thing to do in those circumstances. And of course, the public, what the public have voted for is they voted for Brexit. But when the Prime Minister says that Brexit means Brexit, no one, including the Prime Minister, knows exactly what that means.
I mean, that's a clever point, but the main issue...
It's a real point.
No, the main issue is that there was a very binary choice. It was a binary choice. We could either stay in the EU, and forgive me, Tom knows what that means, I know what that means, certainly my constituents were very well aware of what that meant, or leave it. Now,
the trouble is we don't know what
circumstances.
But you know, it's all very well to say that you don't know exactly what the situation will be, but we know what we don't want, which was to stay in the EU. And it's very clear.
We know what we don't want, but we don't know what we do want.
No,
so
but
will it be a Switzerland model or a Norway model or a Turkey model?
You made these points during the actual debate. You
lost
that
I don't want to
referendum.
rerun that argument, but the point is the government seems to be in suspended animation.
And also,
nothing's happening,
you know,
except an argument between Liam Fox and Boris Johnson over whose job.
Let me put it very simply. There are two principles. There's the freedom of movement, which we want to stop. We want to have some constraint on that. And there's a single market.
Boris Johnson didn't
and there's
want to.
No, he didn't. Maybe he didn't. But that's what a lot of people,
and he's the Foreign Secretary.
want. And that's what we're going to try and negotiate. And Cameron's failure to get a deal on that was what precipitated a lot of my colleagues, 143 of us, which is more than the 8 Liberal Democrat MPs, but 143 of us and 52% of the country have decided to leave the EU. We can get into clever semantic debates, oh, you don't know what you want, but it's very clear that once Article 50 is invoked, there is an overwhelming feeling, not just amongst Brexiteers in Britain, but amongst people, our friends in the EU, that we've got to sort this thing out. And this lingering idea, this sort of, clinging on to nurse for fear of something worse, this inability to accept the result is something which the people
just in a few seconds,
don't have any problem.
We're sort of out of time, but just reply to that.
Well, I think this would not be the politicians, this would be the public, the people who, having looked at what the government have negotiated, and I suspect it's going to be a very bad deal for the UK,
but you're always talking it down. You don't even know what the deal will be.
Well, no, you don't.
It's so
I don't.
Let's come back to this another time. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
I've been